So I want to, first thing I just want to do is open up the meeting and has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yeah, I did.
Is any changes or corrections?
That I can see from my end.
Okay. Does anybody, or do we, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3 of us, so we do have a majority to approve it. Do we know, are any of the other members going to be joining us? Do we know?
I think that's it. Fran said he wouldn't be able to make it tonight.
Okay, okay. And how about Dan Plotkin?
Dan, I haven't heard from, so he might show up.
Okay. So let's do the minutes then of the meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to present to accept the minutes as presented.
Any second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, voice vote? We'll do it.
Aye.
James, aye. Charles,
Aye.
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 And Mark Beglane, aye. So I guess the next issue that we're going to discuss is whether or not we feel that the conditions, and I believe Bethany has sent you guys copies of the stuff that I have. The only thing that, a couple of things that I have, that the easement, the form of the easement has been worked out. I'm trying to get some sort of protection for the town with some sort of certification that the easement is valid, either through a title company or through a lawyer. And that's the only item that I have outstanding. And then that easement finally will have to be recorded with the registry of deeds. It hasn't been recorded or the town hall in Connecticut, which is the easement giving us access. But I just want to make sure that the easement is certified as valid, because I don't know if there's any mortgages or anything on the property. They have to give their consents. So I just wanted someone to certify to the town so that if there were problems in the future, the town would be protected to have something to go back on. But I'm satisfied with the form of the easement. Bethany, I think everybody got a copy of that easement?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's the only thing that I see on that. I believe all of the conditions except for the, and we got a letter, this is on the police department, the intermunicipal agreement. We have something from the fire department that I think meets the requirements. My understanding is Summers does not have a local police department, that they are covered by the state police.
Correct.
And it'll be governed by that. I don't have anything from, they gave us a name of an officer in the letter that we got from the first selectman. And I have not, I had asked their attorney to see if they could get that person to give us something saying that the state police or something, but there is no such agreement. The only concern, I just want to make sure that we don't have any problem. I mean, the police, he basically said they're okay with the agreement, but my concern was I didn't want to have any liability or any problems between, you know, where the police department in East Long Meadow refuses to go through Enfield or vice versa. Dan, we've approved the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay.
And we're now discussing whether or not, based on the stuff, they've met the conditions of our special permit, or our variance, I should say.
Right. I heard that, and I read the material that we received in a letter from the first selectman in Summers, and you know, though I'm not a fan of this petition at all, as you know, at this point, I don't know why we should delay these guys trying to get the state police to give us some kind of letter, which I think it's kind of unlikely we'll get, or will probably fall short of the requirements that we've imposed.
Right, I'm not sure, you know, that because it's the state police, whether the intermunicipal agreement can cover the state police, you know what I'm saying?
Right, but what I'm saying is I don't know that it matters. I mean,
Yeah.
if the thing catches fire, and Summers Fire goes in there, and East Long Meadow Fire goes in there. We don't need the state police aren't going to bring much to the party. It would seem to me, as long as somebody's dealing.
No, but I just want to make sure the police, if they go up there on any type of, say there's a terrorist attack or something going up there, that they're not going to, block it going through Connecticut. That's all.
That goes to crime scene stuff and everything else. You're talking state police, another level over municipal police too. Which I don't know where that, what lines get drawn there.
Yeah, there is no municipal police department in.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying as far as East Long Meadow goes.
Yeah, I don't know in terms, because it's the state police. I don't know if that can be part of an intermunicipal agreement. I just don't know. I've never experienced it before.
The other thing is, and I know there's a letter in here, but those letters from the fire department is for mutual aid. So if Summers has a fire, there's agreement that they can call East Long Meadow and they'll come help them and vice versa. What I thought was specifically being looked for is that they were granted, which I'm sure is already okay, because I know there was simpler letters stating that East Long Meadow can cross into Summers line to get to access to the East Long Meadow parcel.
So that was our big concern, was that they would have the access, and that the fire department was okay with the road as designed. And I believe we got that.
Well, the letter that's in here that was presented in the email is actually a mutual aid agreement.
Yeah, there is a mutual aid agreement that talks about it, but I believe there was a letter. We originally got a crappy letter from the fire department that basically said, the road's okay, but I'm not going to send my guys there.
True.
And I was like, what does that mean?
Well, because
I think that got clarified.
Safety of the apparatus and be able to get them in there without getting stuck.
Yeah, and that was the concern I had, was that the right of way, the design of the right of way, that they could get whatever firefighting equipment up that right of way to the East Long Meadow site, and that they were okay with it in providing the access. I think the first letter said that, but he said he wouldn't send his guys there, which I didn't understand.
So the question is, does the easement satisfy that for them?
The easement gives us, and I was mostly concerned about the construction and the size of the easement, to make sure they were okay. And my understanding, they had those plans way back. Not necessarily the final plan that we have, but they had a plan. But I'm not sure exactly what the fire department had in front of them when they said they were okay with the design.
So the question now would be, would they be satisfied with the plan, what's there, and an inspection of what's there and in place to say, yes, we accept this as, the easement, the turnaround.
Yeah, I'm not sure the easement. I think the easement hasn't been built yet. It's just basically the size, the grade, and how it was going to be. I think it was going to be a gravel roadway, and whether that was acceptable to the fire department, so that they felt they had safe access for their vehicles.
So that would be the question at hand.
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah.
Russell Denver, the planning board chair, has his hand up in the audience,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
Attorney Martin is also in the audience.
Okay. So I don't know, Russ, do you have any concerns?
I'm going to bring him in right now.
Okay.
And Attorney Martin is,
Also, okay. I want to hear Russ's,
wanna
and
let
then I'll
him-
have Attorney Martin then give his concerns.
okay.
Good evening, everyone. So
Hi, Russ.
thanks for letting me say a few words. Regarding the intermunicipal agreement, I have some concerns because under the new charter that we've been in operation for 5 months, I believe the only individual who can sign an agreement and make it effective for the town of East Long Meadow is the town manager. The police chief nor the fire chief can enforce an agreement. Only under the charter, the town manager, who's the chief executive officer. And to the best of my knowledge, I've not seen an agreement signed by Mary McNally. So
Yeah, I mean, when we issued the order, Russ, it was before the charter changed, so we didn't, we couldn't anticipate that.
No,
but the charter's been in effect for 5 or 6 years, the new charter.
Yeah, but I thought the various departments of the board could sign binding their departments.
I would take a look at that again, Mark. I
Okay.
don't, so,
So Russ, those municipal agreements are, as I brought up earlier, are for mutual aid. So say we have a fire here, because I spent 20 years in an apartment, we have a fire here, we've been in agreement with Summers, obviously other towns, that they would come here if we call them and vice versa, not directly attributing to this particular scenario, which comes after that approval was done, decades ago, which would have probably fallen under grandfather when the charter changed. So it's not a new agreement. That's been a standing agreement for years as mutual aid goes. But as far as direct agreement to access this parcel, I don't know if that has to bring up a new system as you're mentioning.
and it's my understanding you didn't have an agreement with the police department yet. So,
But we had basically a letter from the police department that basically, says that they're okay with the road at this point. We're concerned, Russ, about whether or not the road provides, the easement provides adequate access for police, ambulance, fire, and other vehicles that may have to respond to that site in the event of a catastrophe or an event happening up at that location. And the only access is through Bilton Road. Safe access. There may be ways to get to the property if somebody wants to go on foot, but vehicular access was the concern that we had, was to make sure that whoever had to get back there could get back there safely, that they had keys to the gates or lock boxes so that they could access the site in the event of an emergency.
and I agree with that, but, and I would agree with Brian on the fire issue. But any new agreement, it's my understanding, and I did sit on the Charter Commission and help draft that,
Yep.
that any new agreement would have to be signed by the town manager. And to the best of my knowledge, I've not seen that yet in this matter, but I just pointed out and
No, we haven't seen it either. And as I said, I appreciate being, told, and if we can get that, if that's what's required.
But is that something for this board to worry about? I mean, we're asked to make a ruling.
Whether they met the
finding,
condition.
what is it we're supposed to actually do here at this
Well,
point?
yeah, so we put 5 conditions on the grant of the variance.
Right?
And the issue is, have our 5 conditions been met or not met at this point?
Okay, whose role is it to make that determination? Is
Well,
that ours?
originally I always thought it was the building inspector's role, but
That-
somehow
and
the
that-
building inspector.
That's
is
why I'm
not-
asking. That's why I'm asking the question.
Right.
I'm asking, and I'm not
Right, and the
suggesting
building
something be
inspector.
right. In my experience, in all the other places I go to in my work, that's it's the zoning board does not get involved in enforcement. It gets involved in making decisions. It gets involved in writing decisions, and that's what it gets involved with. And I think that's probably what we ought to do.
Yeah, and that the issue is the building inspector's not sure whether they are or not met, and so he's going back to us
Okay.
to get
So
our.
in that event, let's let that be the building inspector's problem and the petitioner's problem. The zoning board has done what it's supposed to do. I
Right.
just don't know why we'd be in the middle of this and be arbiters over. We're not in the business of deciding whether conditions are met or not. We're just in the business of imposing those conditions. We're not qualified to opine on whether they're. That's not our. I don't think. I'm speaking, for myself. I don't think that's our role.
I'm not sure. I mean, the building inspector has asked for our input as to whether or not we feel the conditions have been met. Because we're the ones.
What do
who
we know
impose
about
them.
roads and easements?
I
I
understand.
mean, really, what do we know about those? What do we know about fire apparatus access and the suitability of roadways thereof? I mean, it's just, to me, we're going to go around in a circle on a petition that has been contentious, where a land court has apparently ruled with a wand that this is how it's going to happen. And so at this point, why incur additional expense in the town, having to deal with this? We should just let the people that are qualified to make this determination make it.
Right, what we had put down that we wanted some from the police, the fire, We wanted an intermunicipal agreement. I forget, I don't have all the 5 conditions in front of me right now, but we were the ones who put those conditions on. We got letters, and they've been called into question as to whether or not the letters we have meet those conditions.
Yeah, I hear you. But some way we got to break the circle here, you know?
To be
Yes,
honest with
well,
you-
that's what you're attempting to do here.
To be honest with you, I haven't seen the land court ruling. Has anybody had a copy of that?
Yeah, we got the ruling. It has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the planning board. They've been ordered to issue a decision approving the site plan. Is that accurate? Russ could, I think, is,
I've not
now whether it's
seen,
been appealed, I don't know.
I've not seen the final yet, Bethany. I think it's being remanded back to the planning board.
Yes, it was remanded last week.
Right, but it was an order to issue it with whatever appropriate conditions, wasn't it? And findings?
Yes.
Yeah, which is interesting in and of itself, considering that we've had a number of meetings on it. We actually voted to grant 4 waivers, and then the petitioner told the land court that we never held a site plan review. So that was interesting in and of itself, but we'll leave it at that. I believe we have how many days before we have to hold a hearing?
45.
And we will make use of those 45 days.
I mean, if we deem it necessary to have any agreements signed off on, I'm not sure we're the ones that have to draft the agreement, but something, if that be the case, then it should be presented to the town manager.
Those are
With the
my,
endorsement probably by the police, the fire, and the DPW.
No, I don't really understand the town manager's job description. I'm not real familiar with it, but it would seem to me that he or she ought to have the responsibility to determine what departments under her control need to issue statements regarding the applicability and satisfaction of these requirements.
Mhm.
That's what needs to happen. It should not be a zoning board of appeals. Shouldn't even be a planning board. I guess it could be a planning board because you guys are sort of in that business, but the zoning boards aren't. You know, we're supposed to decide what laws can be bent for people properly and what laws cannot.
Well, that's what I was saying, Dan, was, did, Chief Morissette go in and inspect or see the plans for the easement? Is he satisfied with, the turnarounds there? I don't know about that. I don't see
Right,
anything.
and I agree. I understand. It seems, a lot of us don't like this. We didn't vote for this. We would wish it didn't happen. But now that it has, now that the land court, whose judge probably does not live next to a solar field herself or himself, we have to have this thing now. It seems to me we probably ought to just be expeditious and get in processing it and letting it go on. Otherwise, I think we risk further expense and litigation, and probably doesn't look very good either.
Yeah, I mean, we granted the variance before the site plan approval was denied, and they appealed the site plan. There's been no appeal of the variance one way or the other. It's just the question has come in as to whether or not the conditions have been met. I think Attorney Pill feels the conditions have not been met. I don't know if you read his material, but he feels that the intermunicipal agreement should cover a lot more than just, the roadway. I'm not sure from the liability point of view. But, you could theoretically have a terrorist attack and the police and fire or whatever have to get up there and other emergency personnel. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, in today's day and age, anything can happen.
Well, it's right down the street from my house, so I hope it doesn't.
And I understand. What else I'm saying, I just want to make sure that if police and fire need to get back there to address the issue, that they can get back there safely, and the people who are responsible for doing it feel that they can get back there and access the site safely to protect, the nearby residents, the project, everybody. And that's what I was looking to get. You know, it's something that everybody's okay with the East Long Meadow Police and Fire going through down Belden Road and up through the right of way to get to the site, and that they had the lockbox access to the site because it is fenced in to keep, you know, intruders out, you know, from a safety point of view. And I don't know what the fire hazard is there. I know they've over the years have changed the makeup of the solar panels to make them less likely to be, you know, causing fires from reflections and that type of stuff.
Well, you could certainly have a brush fire there.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You
absolutely.
can certainly have an electrical fire. They've got inverters and transformers up
Yep.
there, but that risk is frankly no greater than any public utilities equipment catching fire
Yeah.
at the substation in East Long Meadow by the DPW. So,
Right.
you know, at this point, I think we need to stop standing on ceremony and
No, that's why
come
I'm
up with
asking
better
the
ways
board.
to protect our town against these kinds of petitions. You know, but it is what it is. These people, we should be doing what we need to do to let them get on with it.
Well, that's the question I was asking the board as to whether or not they felt the conditions have been met. Russ has brought up a point that he believes that they should be signed off by the town manager. I believe it probably should be with the advice and consent of the, you know, the people who, the police, fire, and DPW. And if that information is given and that's a requirement of the town, then it should be given to the manager ASAP. The information, if they want more information to sign in that agreement, they can ask for it.
I had that same sentiment, Mark. But the other thing is, in going with Dan's, is the experts at hand with the building inspector, fire chief, police chief are making those decisions. If those requirements been officially met, to pass to the town manager to finally sign off on it. I think as we mentioned, we made that decision a long time ago. Hindsight, it was made before there was even a site plan approval, which I don't think we should have been involved at that point, but that's just an opinion. So I don't think this stuff has been met. I think there needs to be more due diligence done. Not to keep it on our plate any longer, though.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's basically what I'm trying to determine. Charles, you have any input?
I think that the town manager should be signing it. It, you know, it probably should be perfunctory because she should be relying on our heads to you know, inform her. But I think it's under her charge to do it. So.
Dan, you have any other further comments?
No, you know, not really. And I understand why this is sort of happening the way that it is, but in the way our government is structured, at least the way I understand it, the proper thing is for experts to opine on whether something is technically achieved or not.
Right, but we're the ones who put the conditions in, so they're asking us, because we had asked for those things, whether the letters we have, in our opinion, meets.
Right. I think
Whether we
they
make a
did.
recommendation to the.
Yeah, I would make a
manager.
recommendation. My vote would be to make a recommendation that the letter that we received from the the nearby municipal authorities are satisfactory for the purposes. I mean, we're not going to get anything any better out of Summers, and I'm not really concerned about Summers Police Department or Summers resident state trooper, which is what they have. I don't see that as an essential in fighting a disaster at a solar field. As long as a fire department, what you need is fire departments over there, and you know, as long as we've got one or more of those, you know, I'm confident that we're okay.
Anybody second that motion?
At this point, I'd like to hear from Attorney Martin first.
Okay, yeah,
He's raising his hand. Let's get to him before we do anything.
all right. Is Attorney Martin still there?
Is he on mute?
Yes, I was. Thank you.
Hi, Jim. Want some input from you. I don't, do you hear what Russ Denver had to say?
I did. And Thank you, folks, for allowing me to speak. Get this up a little higher, maybe. I'll try and control my frustration as well as I can, because this discussion is just further emblematic of the difficulties, roadblocks, and challenges that the town of East Long Meadow has erected against this project that is really unnecessary and improper, in my judgment. Just as way of backing, you recall that when we started this project, the petitioner was forced to go to the land court, and that decision for the town to force the petitioner to go to the land court resulted in the land court chief justice ruling that your bylaw was illegal, unconstitutional, and remanded it back to the planning board to review the project for site design review. We set then off on a long, arduous site plan review process. And at the very end of that, the town decided to change council. The new council said that he disagreed with the prior council's opinion on frontage. The board said that they weren't comfortable going forward now, even though that had been addressed several months before. So we went to the zoning board to get a variance. With 2 weeks' notice, you folks did a very admirable job of giving us an audience. The vote was 4-1, by the way, Mr. Plaka, not several of you, against the variance. We went back to the variance with the variance in hand, and ended up with a 2-2 vote, which denied the site design review. Back to the appeals court we go, to the land court, excuse me. The court again rules that it has to go back to the planning board for another hearing and for the members of the planning board to state their reasons. This time it ends up being a 3-1 against, and again rejecting the project, and off we go. Back to the land court, where the land court has now ruled and remanded the case back to the probate court, to the planning board, with specific instructions that they are not to address, incur, refer to, or consider the status of the zoning of the property in ruling their decision, just whether or not it meets site design review. In the meantime, and Mark, you can attest to this, Bethany can attest to this, we worked diligently to try to get the conditions satisfied. I myself wrote several times to the police chief trying to satisfy. I believe Mr. Beglane did. I know Bethany made contact for it. And for at least 5 to 6 months, no response. And finally, we got a response saying, I'm retiring. I'm sorry, I never got to this. What you have before you now in terms of conditions are police chief saying he's got no problem, the fire chief saying he's got no problem. You have an intermunicipal agreement that is very, I think it's a dozen years old. It's signed a long time ago, that says that the towns will cooperate. We worked out with your chairman an easement. This is an easement that will be signed by the town manager because it's an easement granted to the town of East Long Meadow, and it will be signed by your town manager, who's the chief executive officer. It's already been signed by the petitioner. The form of the easement was reviewed by your chairman, a very knowledgeable real estate and planning lawyer. And it gives the town a 20-foot wide access across the Summers property, which happens to be owned by the owner of the East Long Meadow property, to access the property for any reason. And so what do we have here now? We have an easement that's been in the form approved and has been executed by the petitioner. It's being submitted to the town this week to be signed by the chief executive, giving you 20-foot wide easement to come onto the property. And then also some of the conditions that Mr. Begley wanted. The road has been looked at by the fire department. It's wide enough, the turnaround's wide enough to get their equipment in there. The police have said that it's fine. The first selectman of Summers has indicated that they have no problem with East Long Meadow first responders coming into Summers to access this site. The state police, who we contacted today, that resident trooper, said that he would check with his boss to see if he could send a letter in because he has no problem. But if they didn't, he would ask the first selectman to indicate that he has spoken with the the state trooper assigned to Summers, and he has no problem with it. And so what are we talking about? Are we talking about, do you think if there's a fire at this, that Summers is going to erect a blockade and say, stop, anyone from East Long Meadow cannot come into Summers to fight this fire? If that's what we're down to, then I don't know what to say about that. If there's a terrorist attack, are they going to block East Long Meadow from helping with this situation? The petitioner has endeavored to satisfy the petitions, the conditions. We believe they are all satisfied once the easement is signed. And, I think it makes sense to avoid another trip to land court, because that's where you'll be going again if the town says that these conditions are not satisfied and the building inspector denies a building permit. How we're here tonight is because Mr. Beglane apparently was told that the building inspector was uncertain as to whether or not the conditions had been satisfied. They're clear, in my humble opinion, they're clearly satisfied. I don't know what else anyone in the town could ask for to meet those conditions being satisfied. And I think if you, at some point, appropriate time, endorse that, then the building inspector has the answer to the question, are they satisfied? So I would urge you to not contribute to the unnecessary, prolonged legal delay in this project and approval, and this really just of this variance, and make a statement that these conditions have been satisfied upon the execution of the easement, and allow this to go back to the planning board for the site design review that the Chief Justice of Land Court has ordered again. I think I hope I made myself clear.
So, thank you. I'd like to just make some comments. I do think that if it's a requirement that the chief executive officer sign some sort of intermunicipal agreement or a signing saying that we're okay with and consent to based on, and that the executive officer at the time they're given the easement to sign is also given the documentation that we've been given, and the planning board. Russ, does the planning board have that documentation as well?
Bethany, have you forwarded it to everyone?
What was the document?
The documents we have tonight, have that been given to the planning board?
I don't think the whole planning board. I think Russ got them, but I can do that.
Okay, because I want to make sure they have it, but I'd also like to make sure the town manager has that. And then I guess the issue is, do we want to do a recommendation from our board as to whether or not we feel or don't, or make no recommendation and rely on what we have for the town manager to make that decision? Or do we want to make a recommendation that we feel that the conditions have or have not been met?
So Mark, if I could just interrupt for one thing. So that would be extremely helpful as well for the planning board, because as Mr. Martin failed to mention on numerous occasions, when your zoning board took a vote and granted the variance with conditions, and it came back to the planning board, both Mr. Richards and myself on each occasion said that we would not vote for the site plan because all the conditions had not been met, specifically the intermunicipal agreement. And why Mr. Martin continues to fail to mention that, I don't know. So if your board takes the vote and sends it to Mary and she grants it and signs it, I think we're coming.
Well, I guess the question,
I think we're coming to a conclusion.
Right, and I guess the concern I have is who prepares that intermunicipal agreement?
Good question. Yep.
I
Begley?
Yeah,
If I may respond to that, here we are almost 2 years later. One wonders why we would not agree to wait until the conditions were met before the planning board would take its vote, because it has taken 2 years, and you just heard Mr. Denver say they'll take all of the 45 days to reschedule the hearing. This is an issue that really should not be an issue. with respect to an intermunicipal agreement, it requires the town of Summers to also participate. And that's what you already have in place, an intermunicipal agreement with Summers and East Long Meadow. Correct, Mark? There's one in place.
Well, there's an intermunicipal agreement, a mutual aid between the fire department, the fire departments. I don't believe there is a mutual aid agreement or an intermunicipal agreement between the executives of each town. We have a letter from the heads of various departments saying they're okay with it. We have a letter from the head of the
First selectman.
selectman in Summers that basically says they're okay with it, but he does acknowledge that he doesn't really have any jurisdiction over the police because they're state police. So I would like to, based on if we can get something from him, basically he has no problem, present that to our person and then have an agreement basically saying that, you know, both towns are okay with the design and stuff. That I would consider with all the input from various people is sufficient to meet our requirements. That's what I feel if we had that. And once the easement's recorded, then, you know, my opinion would be that all those conditions have been met and that most likely, but, you know, I'm not really prepared to prepare an intermunicipal agreement in this particular case, but it would basically say that we're satisfied, both the towns are satisfied with the easement that's been granted and the access is sufficient based on the information to provide safe, adequate access to the police, fire, and other ambulance, whoever has to get up there for emergency purposes. And, you know, Michael Pill keeps bringing up about the liability. I'm not so sure there's a lot of liability with, you know, traveling over a road, you know, to address an emergency in East Long Meadow. I mean, that happens in a lot of places where you have to go through another town's, you know, roads or street to access a particular site that's in your town.
So you have a mutual aid between the fire departments. You have the first selectman of Summers saying that they're okay with East Long Meadow coming in.
Right.
You have fire department saying that they would have no trouble going in there. You have the police saying they have no problem going in there. And so is it form over substance? Now you want, in addition, mutual aid, you want something
Well,
that's
I don't, I think with the fire department is there, I was looking for something basically that was all inclusive of all the departments with the intermunicipal agreement. That's all I was looking for. And whether you can attach those letters and that constitutes an intermunicipal agreement, I don't know, Jim.
Mark, we asked for that. We sent your decision to them. This is what we were able.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I'm not saying that it is. And as I said, Russ Denver is looking for something to be enforceable against the town, that it needs to be signed by the, and if the town manager is willing to sign something that says they're okay with everything, that would meet my approval, but I'm only one of 5 members.
Who's going to prepare that? Am I going to prepare that and say, here, Ms. McNally, sign this?
Well,
You know,
I don't know. I don't know
well,
who prepares that.
That's why you need to think practically, the members of this board, as to whether or not your concerns of the fire company being able to get there, where the police can get there.
Well, that's why I would make a recommendation as the board that we feel that it's been met and that they should sign an agreement, whatever the form of that agreement may be, you know, that meets that requirement. So it's an all-inclusive agreement, that's all. But I, you know, for me to say I'm the guy who's going to prepare that, I'm not sure that I'm the expert at preparing intermunicipal agreements. But I don't have a problem personally recommending, you know, I think if the state police and the easement get recorded, I'm satisfied.
Well,
that,
Mark, are we
conditions-
bypassing the process? I mean, isn't the process for our board to hear appeals of decisions of the building inspector, of the town manager? So I don't know what's before our board right now.
Right, well,
Right.
the question was, it was that the building inspector is putting his hands up and saying, I
But
don't know.
did the building inspector make a decision? But where's the building inspector? Has he made a decision that, well,
No, he has not, but he's
Char-
out.
Charles, this is exactly, this is exactly the point I was trying to make earlier. You're making it again better than I made it. What is before us? What is it worth? I know what
The issue is whether the
I know
board
what
is
Attorney Martin would
satisfied.
like us to do, but Mark, I don't understand why a zoning board of appeals is tasked with weighing in as to whether department heads in this town are satisfied with conditions that we've placed. The conditions that we placed were reasonable and customary, given the circumstances. In every zoning board I'm aware of, including the other one I was on for 15 years, we never got involved in this. We didn't have 45-minute conversations debating whether or not a condition was met because it wasn't our task to make that determination. And I don't think it's proper for us to continue to debate this tonight. If what you want is a consensus of the board as to whether we think the conditions are met, call the vote.
Well, that's what I was trying to do.
Otherwise, remand this thing back to the town manager and say, look, we're a zoning board. They asked us to grant a variance, and we did. So leave us alone, unless somebody's going to deny this and appeal it back to us, as Charles just said.
Well, as I said, Dan, your motion didn't carry. No one seconded it. So then I asked for a motion. No one brought the motion forward.
All right, well, then the motion fails. What happens when a motion fails?
Right. Well, at this point, we don't have anything. So the issue is, do we do a recommendation, which your motion was, and nobody voted to second it?
I think the record, to be clear, is that no one did second it, but a member of your board said, Mr. Channing said he would like to hear from me before taking further action on Mr. Plotkin's motion. I think that is the correct recital.
All right, there you go.
So now I guess I would suggest that maybe you renew your motion, see if we can get a second, have a vote on it to make a recommendation, that yay or nay.
All right, I put that same motion back on the table, that the zoning board of appeals recommend to the town manager that, in our view, the conditions that we placed on the petition have been met.
Anybody second that?
So to clarify, Dan, you're asking us to turn this over to the town manager for her stamp and approval and signature.
Right, with our
Well,
recommendation.
if the literal meaning of my motion, I suppose, is that we are agreeing as a board that the conditions have been met. I make that motion because, based on the letters I read and so forth, I don't know that those conditions can get any closer to being met.
Thank you for the
And they're met. I find myself, unfortunately, agreeing with Attorney Martin in that.
Why is it fortunate?
clarification, that's all. I just wanted
because
to.
it's difficult.
Because I was
to do.
never in favor of the variance. It should never have been granted. It was a mistake. That's why. I'm not happy about it.
Thank you, Mr. Denver.
Yes, and it has not been 2 years. And the reason we're taking all 45 days, if you paid close attention, Mr. Martin, is that as of tomorrow evening, we lose a planning board member. And I'm waiting for the town manager to then make an appointment, so we'll have a full board. So I think that's an appropriate use of our time. And if you don't, such is life.
We have a motion on the table.
listen,
Nobody's-
I'm not prepared to second your motion, Dan.
Either.
So I will not, because I don't think it's a right for our decision at this point. I think if the building inspector had made a ruling that they had not satisfied it, then at that point it could come to us. But I don't know what the appeal is.
It's not an appeal. It's just the question was whether or not we felt as a board the conditions have been met.
And
I happen to agree with Charles, even though I made the motion. I'm not really
Yeah.
disappointed.
No, I'll
that we can't
second the
agree.
motion so we can put it to vote. I'll second the motion. I'll second Dan's motion to put it to vote.
Okay, we'll do a voice vote, starting with you, Jim.
So I vote to deny the motion, Dan's motion, based on, namely, I don't know if an intermunicipal agreement's valid, but more importantly, quite frankly, the easement hasn't been signed. till I get a valid executed easement that's duly recorded, the condition has not been met, in my opinion.
Charles,
I abstain.
Dan,
I've, the reasons for for the motion are I stated them clearly.
Yep. okay, in favor. Brian,
I abstain.
I'm going to vote in favor of it. So what's the final tally? You got 2 abstentions, 2 in favor and 1 against. Does that carry? I'm not sure procedurally. We don't have a majority of the board. We have a majority of those voting, but I don't know that that carries the day on this motion.
Attorney Martin, you need the zoning board's approval tonight because it is presumed that the building inspector would then issue with an affirmative ruling from us. Is that it?
No, I was actually, I was told tonight was a discussion and that I was invited to attend and
Okay,
participate.
so this isn't, Mark, this isn't a binding vote anyway. This
No,
is-
it's a recommendation
Yeah.
to the manager. That's all it is to the town manager saying, in our opinion, we feel that you've got the
Okay.
best you're gonna get.
Because
I agree with, we can put a condition on it saying, once you sign the easement, because we can't have the easement signed until the town manager signs it. They may be looking for some direction from the people who put the condition on.
So my opinion is it has not been met.
But
Yeah.
can we put a condition that they sign the easement and recorded the easement, and try to get something from the state police? A letter from the state police person. Would that meet?
To fully answer your question, when we go to the building inspector, he throws up his hand. So we're either going to have, this would, as I said, be guidance to him. That's all this is, I believe.
And we'd give that guidance to both the manager and to the building inspector.
But I think the department heads, police and fire.
Well, they get copies of everything as well, so that they have the whole picture with our recommendation or lack thereof. I don't know whether that's a recommendation, because we do not have a majority of the board.
I also can recall Chief Morissette's concerns about certain things, and I don't know if they've been satisfied to his.
Well, I believe he amended his letter. Bethany, isn't that accurate?
Yes.
And I think we have that somewhere. The first letter was, I didn't understand it. But I think he's corrected and said he's fine with it. So that's the last communication I saw. And the police department finally, when the new chief got in, was okay with it. So the issue is just really the intermunicipal agreement and finalizing the easement.
Correct. I agree with that. I just don't know how I can say the conditions have been met if they're still out.
Well, no, and I would say the
Right.
conditions have been
Right.
met, except we need the easement signed and recorded. But, the manager may not sign it without some input from us. That's the concern I have.
Okay.
Saying that if they're not satisfied, I'm not gonna sign an easement unless they're satisfied.
Right, okay.
So I wanted to give some input to the parties that have to sign the documents that are necessary. That's all, on our board to say, yeah, okay, we feel that if they sign the easement, it gets recorded, we get something from the state police person that we're satisfied, in essence, that the conditions have been met. And if you'll sign the intermunicipal agreement or sign off saying these constitute an intermunicipal agreement between the towns, I'm okay with that.
I agree with that, but to me, it seemed like I was putting a condition on a condition, but.
Well, I understand, but I mean, we're in sort of a catch.
Right, yeah, I'm not trying to get into.
Because
some
they're not gonna sign the easement, I don't think, unless they know we're satisfied with it. And then we'll
Alright.
sign an municipal agreement, and it also will give the building inspector our opinion that they've been met and whether he'll issue the permits. But it'll tell the building inspector, we don't have a signed easement as of yet, but, one of the conditions is that the manager has to sign it. Well, we're playing catch-22, nice
Right.
circular argument. Well, I'm not gonna sign it until the board does it, and then they're gonna go back to the court and say, look, we're getting a circle jerk here.
All right. Yeah, then go for it. If someone wants to make that motion, but.
That's all I'm trying to do is move it off our plate.
Sounds good to
our
me.
feeling as to what's there and basically say that as far as we're concerned, these conditions have been met. We're okay with the agreement, but it needs to be signed and it needs to be recorded. And we need something from, in my opinion, we need something from the state police. I know Attorney Martin said he's talked to them, but I'd want something from them for the record and present that to the town administrator, manager to basically sign off and say, okay, this constitutes with all the approvals, this constitutes an intermunicipal agreement, and I'll sign the easement. That's what I would like to see done, and then the building inspector could then have our input and have all the documents and then make a decision with all the data, whether or not he feels that, because we're satisfied the conditions, he's satisfied.
That works for me.
I just want to point out, Mark, that we've already provided you with a facsimile copy of the signed easement by the landowner.
Right,
The
it just hasn't been signed by the town, that's why.
Right, originals will be delivered to the town tomorrow,
Right.
to Ally's office for review.
Yeah, right, and I have no problem with that. I just want to give her a recommendation with it, Jim, that's all.
I understand.
So that she's not confused with saying, because I only am one person, I'm not the whole board. So, I don't know if we want to someone wants to do a motion that we make a recommendation that in our opinion, that the conditions have all been met except for, we need the signed agreement by the easement, and we're satisfied. We would like to get something from the state police person that says he has no problem with the access and the arrangement to use Bilton Road to access the site to get to East Long Meadow. So we have anybody to do that motion? Chairman, I just can't do the motion, that's all. Is that, nobody wants to make that motion?
I don't feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's our position to make
I
this
don't
decision.
think it's our position either.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark.
No, I'm trying to move this along. so
I'll make that motion, but I think in my opinion, there's three conditions. One, the municipal agreement, two, the state police recommendation, and three, the easement.
Right, and she won't, I'm trying to get them to sign something.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but go for it.
I think if an motion was going to be made, I would make a motion that these determinations be signed off by the town manager. If she's satisfied or he's satisfied with the conditions we put forth and that have been presented by the department heads on their comments on these actions, then those conditions will be met on her or his determination.
Like, but would she sign? I mean, if sort of,
And then Attorney Martin, you've got something to appeal if she says no, right? Like, where does it go if they don't get these conditions? Like, yeah, I'm just trying to preserve the process. I know it feels like you're getting jerked around. That's not my intent, Jim. My intent is to make sure that the process is followed. And I'm just afraid that with the voice of our board behind something, it binds the people who would be making the decisions, binds their hands and paints them into a corner. When
well, it's only advisory. That's all. This is our opinion as to whether or not. Now, whether they want to sign it, it's still up to them.
Well, that's part of the issue here. Regardless of our personal feelings about this thing, which I think are well known for most of us, that what we're being asked to do, I guess, in this case, is decide whether a set of facts exists, not whether anybody likes a solar field. So, that's why I think we ought to just make the determination, because I don't know what practical effect anything more that you want is going to really have. But I'll go along with that if you guys want to. I'll certainly vote in favor of a motion to make a recommendation to proceed with this if it involves a couple more documents or something. But when you talk about getting this off our plate, it shouldn't have been on our plate. we should have never, we shouldn't be talking about this.
The
When
building
we were,
inspector
when we
couldn't
were
decide.
asked, whether or not the building inspector doesn't want to make a determination, go back to the zoning board, I would have said no. The zoning board made its rulings already on this thing. It granted the variance, right? Do we grant anything else? That's all we had to do, right? Was grant
Right,
the variance?
the variance with
Grant the
five
variance.
conditions.
That was our job, was to rule on that case, and we did. I don't think we should have anything more to do with this.
So here's what I'd say. I would entertain a motion as an advisory from the zoning board of appeals that the conditions we pose on that variance be shifted to the town manager for their evaluation, recommendation, and sign off. And if they have, those conditions are satisfactory to them, then those conditions have been met. Based on everything we have been shown. Not saying one way or another whether I agree that they've been met or not, just saying that I would make a motion that this be shifted to the town manager's desk for their,
Okay, and I think
And I'll
that's.
second, I will second that motion.
And I have a problem with that motion because I think you're putting, we're the ones who put the condition on as to whether or not documents have been presented, whether the building inspector's seen those documents and whether he's satisfied that meets the conditions, I don't know. If it comes back, they can appeal that decision to us, I guess. Bethany, is the building inspector hasn't seen any of this stuff, has he?
Not recently. I can send it over to him now and he'll see it in the morning.
Yeah, I'd like to see if he'd be willing to make a decision based on whether he'd issue the permit on that. I think in our opinion,
Yeah,
um,
and at that point, the building it can put it to bed. He can put it to bed. Or if he denies it for whatever reason, then Mr. Martin brings the appeal to our board. We have the building inspector present the evidence that he's got denying it. Mr. Martin rebuts it with his client's view, and then we make a decision. I just think the process is important.
no, I'm trying to avoid having to come back to us. That's what I'm trying to do.
I get it. I get it.
And I thought if we could make a recommendation with saying that we felt conditions, I think 2, 3, and 4 have been met. 1 and 5 with the police department. We got to get something from Summers, and we need the intermunicipal agreement and the recorded easement, signed and recorded easement. If those conditions are met, then we're satisfied. That's what I'd like to see, because I think that would at least give them some input from our board as to what we would ultimately like to see. If they choose not to sign it or not to make a decision, that's their call. But we're the ones who put the condition on. They've given us the information. Do we feel the conditions we put in have been met? That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to just keep kicking the can down the road, that's all. So, well, the only motion, there's 2 motions before us. I mean, I've got Brian's motion that we basically make no recommendation, present it, and let them make the decision, which I'm not in favor of. I think you got problems when you've got a board and you kick off your conditions off to another party who's not authorized. Town manager isn't the one to make that decision. It's the building inspector, in my opinion.
Kick it off to him.
Yeah, well, I would say I'd kick it off to the 2 of them, and then I would make a recommendation to the town manager to sign the easement, that we feel the easement is satisfactory, so that we can finalize that condition. And as to whether or not an intermunicipal agreement is met by what we have, we feel that it with all the stuff that we have, if we get the thing from the police department, that meets the requirements, and that they could sign something saying that they're satisfied in lieu of an intermunicipal agreement, that this constitutes an intermunicipal agreement for the purposes of our decision. That's all.
Is that a motion?
I can't make a motion because I'm the chairman.
Okay. You
Somebody
want to,
second
Brian, you
Brian's
want to
motion?
amend your motion to go more along the lines of what Mark just stated, and I'll second
Sure.
that.
so then we would amend the motion to take the evidence in front of us and have the town manager sign off on the easement if it's appropriate, but I don't know anything about easements, so I can't even.
But I've looked at it. I'm satisfied that the easement is in place on the ground. Once it gets signed and recorded, that would give the town and any of its officers the ability to go across private property to get to other private property in East Long Meadow, and that they've been given the lockbox accesses to the gates that they're going to need to get into the location. I'm satisfied that those conditions have been met. I'm satisfied with the easement, that it adequately describes where on the property it's going to be. There's a plan showing the exact location of it, and we've got the details of the construction. So I'm satisfied that those are there. I believe that plan was presented, maybe not the final form, to all the fire department, the police department, and that's what I believe they signed off on. But I want to make sure that everybody has a copy, and that with all that information, that it's our recommendation they sign the easement, and it's our recommendation that they probably meet the requirements of an intermunicipal agreement, but it needs to be signed off by the town manager. All we're doing is making a recommendation. We're not saying yet to sign it or not sign it. We're recommending they do sign it, so that
But
we can
isn't that in
finalize the
effect?
conditions.
Isn't that in effect the decision though?
Huh?
I mean, how does the town manager go against our recommendation?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's, I'm hoping that, like, because I think they've done, once they get the thing from the police department, I think they've met the conditions, in my opinion. I'm only one of five, so I can't say how you guys feel about whether they've met all the other conditions, and whether or not all of the totality of what they've got, if the town manager signs off, says, I'm okay with it, that'll constitute all the stuff we have, that constitutes a valid intermunicipal agreement, in my opinion, and I'm going to sign off that this constitutes that. And that will meet the last condition. We have an intermunicipal agreement. If she doesn't and says, no, I'm not satisfied, I want a formal agreement, then we'll have to, someone's going to have to draft up a formal agreement.
I think again that that goes to where I was headed with it. It ends up in Mary's hands.
It will end up in her hands ultimately with our recommendation. She'll ultimately make the decision whether to sign that as a new municipal agreement, or whether she wants a formal municipal agreement, and whether she'll sign the easement. Obviously, easement is one of the conditions on the thing. If she won't sign the easement, then they haven't met that condition. And we're in sort of a circular situation, but I'd rather give a recommendation to this board that we feel that those requirements have been met.
So I do agree, as long as it's signed by the town, as far as the easement goes, that condition has been met. The police, we have to wait on that answer from the state police on.
Right, and that would be one of the conditions I would want to be given, that they get that, if they get that, whether that in totality will constitute an intermunicipal agreement that she can sign off on, and we recommend that she would sign off on. Whether she wants something formal, or will take that and sign off that as an intermunicipal agreement.
So as fire goes, there's that only part with, I'm not gonna send my trucks out there.
That was, yeah, but that was supplemented later by another letter that said they're okay with it now.
As long as they're, if that's, and I kind of recall that, then that would be a condition that's met. So then the conditions that are up in the air would be the state police and that municipal portion. And
Right,
then
and whether this constitutes an intermunicipal agreement,
correct.
the totality, and that it's sort of a unique situation, and we'd recommend that she sign something stating that that constitutes an intermunicipal agreement, and the town will honor it.
So I know Jim was kind of saying that putting a condition on a condition, but I think at this point that would put that ball in their court.
Right, we've made our opinion that what we've seen, these are what we feel that it meets, what we intended by putting those conditions on, if they finish up what they have to do.
So then my recommendation, so I would adjust my motion that as long as those final two pieces are in place as far as the easement and the municipality from the police end are taken care of, that then as long as Mary is satisfied with it from the town side, that would be signed.
Right.
And that would be her final decision at that point. To what you played.
Correct, with our recommendation.
If that's a motion, I second it.
That is my motion.
Okay, we'll take a voice vote. Dan, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Charles,
I'm against, I think that we're stepping into the toes of the town manager.
and I also vote in favor of it. So we do have a motion, and it's been approved to make a recommendation that basically that it's our recommendation, the conditions have been approved if the easement is signed and we're satisfied with the easement. Two, if the state police person that was identified in the first selectman's letter gives us a letter saying he's satisfied with the conditions, the approvals, that it's our condition that we feel that all of those have been met, that probably constitutes an intermunicipal agreement. We're okay with signing some sort of an intermunicipal agreement. Whether that constitutes an intermunicipal agreement, I don't know. But that'll be up to Mary. So that would be, that I believe, is that everybody else's understanding? I know you're against it. Charles? Does anybody?
Well,
think differently?
did the motion, did the vote pass?
Yes, it did.
Okay. What does it matter at this point? I mean, you
Right,
know,
well, no, that's what I'm saying, but I just want to make sure that the direction we give is clear to the, to Mary, and copies be given to the building inspector as well. And the planning board gets copies of all these documents.
I think if the minutes have been accurately recorded, which I'm sure Rebecca has done, there'll be a good record of how this
Yeah.
went.
We're not officially signing off on anything. It's just that.
No, we're just making a
Right.
recommendation.
Right.
Which I don't believe we ever really should have been in the business of doing in the first place.
I second that one.
So, well, thank you, and I apologize for tying you guys up so long, but, you know.
And I apologize for my orneriness. I had a root canal about 2 hours ago, so. I'm not kidding.
I'm just glad you're not drooling.
All right.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, folks.
Okay.
This
Do we have a
was-
motion to officially close the meeting?
Make a motion to officially close the meeting.
All in favor? Aye.
Right.
Okay, thank you for attending, everybody.